Welcome to the latest edition of the On and Up coaching series of book club podcasts. I'm Paul Gaskell and I'm the owner of On and Up Coaching. And in this latest episode, we have a slightly revolving panel. I want to thank, first of all, in the order I can see them, who knows how it will come out on the recording, Mike Sicaranza, Rachel Gaskell, Rosanna Ortega-Lopenza, and Kim Mooney Doyle. So thank you so much for joining me today. Just a quick reminder of the purpose of these book club podcasts. Our intent is to evaluate a book that's impacted at least me in my coaching, and to try and dissect what it has to offer, so that especially if you have not read the book, then you get a sense of what it's about and why perhaps it's worthwhile spending some time evaluating. And this week we've been looking at Mindset by Carole Dweck. And just as a starting point, I just want to share couple of thoughts about the book and its purpose. How about I hit the share button? Yes, that would do it. Okay. So this was originally published, I discovered, I didn't realize it was quite this old, in 2007, but she actually has been continuing to work on this pretty much since then, and kind of looking at mindset in all sorts of different contexts. It says it's sold over 1 million copies. My sense was that this probably had sold more than Drive, but maybe not. Carole Dweck is a Stanford professor. She, I guess, is most known for the concept of the growth mindset. And it seems to me that this is potentially another kind of counterintuitive idea, but it's been incredibly deeply researched. And it's based on the idea that focusing on things like grades and being smart can actually be detrimental to a person's growth and how their brain develops. So that's the sort of headline, if you like, what the book's about. I'm going to start with Mike, and just give us your sense of what you think you thought was important about Carole Dweck's mindset.
Well, thanks, Paul. This is one of my favorite books. This, along with Grit, kind of go hand in hand. And fixed mindset versus growth mindset is something that I've constantly struggled with in my life. I would say, as someone as myself as a teenager, I tended to be more in a fixed mindset kind of capability. But as I've gotten older, I've tried to focus more on being in a growth mindset, and I've tried to, try to preach that to my kids as much as possible, that, putting the work in is what's really, really important. It's not really about the results. The results will come if you put in the work. I think if you ask my kids all the time what I say, that's probably, that's probably the thing that comes about most, that things in life are hard, and the things that are best in life are hard. So if you want to, you got to dream it, you got to believe in it, you got to work at it, and that's eventually how you achieve it. So that's kind of, always been my key takeaway from this book is, that things are not easy, and great things are not easy. And as a result, you need to put the work in order for things, to do the things you want to do in life. So, yeah.
I think one of the things that I really kind of was drawn to is the idea that actually praising people for following a process rather than for outcomes is much better for the development. Which I said at the beginning, it seems counterintuitive, but kind of, I guess I've been exposed to this long enough now where it seems counterintuitive perhaps to do the opposite, except in those moments where you're trying not to react to something a child has said to you about their experience. With that, I'll go to Rachel. Your initial impressions of Carole Dweck's work.
I thought it resonated really wonderfully for me. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, when IQ testings were very big and expectations were labeled on kids, it very much almost put you into a category, and you felt that you had to fulfill those expectations that were applied. But for me in particular, understanding the concepts, it really feels like a story of good news, especially in 2020, when we have so much awareness of social and racial injustices. For me, it's about, hey, we've got great news. However, the cards that we were dealt, or where we've grown up, or the the things that were provided to us or not provided to us. We all have the ability to build the capability within and grow. So for me, it felt like a very time appropriate message of good news.
Yeah. And what I thought was interesting, actually, which kind of maybe makes it a better book than Drive, is she has so many different examples from people who, you know, look like they're in really awful situations, of kind of how they're able to use growth mindset to kind of evolve and develop and be probably more successful than those who feel like they're advantaged but have a fixed mindset. You know?
That's funny, Paul, because one of the things that I noticed about that book after looking at it again is some of the sports ones that she picks, you know, don't hold up quite as well in 2020 as they did in 2007. I'm thinking of Alex Rodriguez, of course.
Right.
You know, great baseball player, you know, growth mindset in the sense that he works really hard, but big time cheater.
Yes,
So
yeah. Although we will get to this, but she does talk about Billy Bean, and that example really resonated with me. So I'll get to that, but I'll get Rosanna's initial impressions first.
Well, I have more questions as a parent. Again, it's like, what should I be saying to my kids, you know? Yeah. Because usually I tend to give like, oh, that was very kind. You're so smart. Look at you. And now I need to think twice to be able to communicate with my kids. So it requires practice to be able to communicate in an effective way and plant that seed on the kids' behavior and mentality to, if you can conquer anything as long as you put your mind to it. And that's usually what we try to tend to do as a family, right?
Yes.
So I have a lot of questions, and I love when she was asking about what triggers and how you're supposed to determine what kind of behavior goes first, whether you're a fixed-minded kind of person or a growth-minded kind of person. And she asked these questions of, like, how do you feel when there is someone in the room smarter than you, you know? How do you feel when there is a challenge in whatever project you're working on, or a life challenge, like, again, like the one that we're living right now during the pandemic, you know? What's your take on that? And then you have to work on your mind, in your mindset to conquer, I will say. So that was a very fascinating way to put it, because we all live with these sort of challenges every day, but to be able to read it and analyze it, it makes you to be more mindful. And mindfulness is something that I feel like I lack a lot of when I'm communicating with my kids. You know, like the first reaction, even your own communication, what you're saying to you as an individual, you know?
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. And I wonder what other exercises we can do to kind of improve that mindset, because there's a saying, like, you cannot teach a old dog a new trick, but she says quite the opposite thing, right? Like, as long as you put your mind to it, you can do it. And that's what really challenges you, makes you grow as a person and make your neurons working. So it's fascinating.
I think there's a very instructive diagram I think she has towards the end of the book, which kind of talks about what someone with a fixed mindset, how they approach things and how they deal with failure and how they try to avoid challenges. And then it's got the opposite for people with a growth mindset who take on board things that others do who maybe are better than them, and will kind of persevere. And I think she said in one case, some of the examples she had, the people who with the growth mindset didn't see failure as we might have seen it as failure for them. It was about learning. But so I think one of the fascinating things is it's not easy to get there, you know, and it's not like I don't flick a switch and now I'm a growth mindset person. You know, it's like a constant evolution.
Yeah.
In terms of speaking, I'm sure we'll get to more of this, but one simple thing I would say is, in terms of talking especially to kids, one of the things that she says in a few different places in the book and elsewhere is that you want to be looking for things to praise, but not necessarily outcomes or talent, because talent is a thing to be developed, not a, you're not there. Even, and their examples, sports example include Michael Jordan, which probably does hold up, as someone who I think wasn't even rated highly enough to be on his varsity team, basketball.
He got cut.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
I actually like that example of Michael Jordan.
Yeah. But kind of then, like his practice schedule was just, a killer. So I think praising the process, not necessarily the outcomes or the perceived talent.
Yeah.
Kim, what do you make of mindset?
Well, thank you again for having me back. I really like this book. I read it at a pivotal point in my PhD program, right when I realized that I was undertaking the most challenging part of my PhD program, right as I was pregnant with my third baby. Had 2 learning curves that I was embarking on all at once. And I just so appreciated it, because that idea that even though the outer measures of my success were concrete, did I get the funding? Did I get published? Did I get this job? Did I could still, even if I wasn't successful in those, I could still be successful in the process of growing, because I was getting better with each attempt. And like one of you mentioned, that it's a habit of mind that you have to start, that I had to start training myself in. So each rejection wasn't the end of the road. It was an opportunity for me to get better. And one of the things that she says that resonates with me, especially in thinking of the girls when I need the language to use with them, is the power of yet. So, this grant didn't get funded. Well, not yet. So-and-so didn't get a certain role in the Nutcracker. Not yet. So it gives it a fluidity, and it also gives it a potential that that kind of generates hope in taking the next steps in one's work, whether that's work or play or, academics.
That's great. That's great. Thanks for sharing. Are there any things that you question, apart from Alex Rodriguez? Like anything you question about the book and its validity? Because she's pretty, I'd say, having seen her speak a couple of times, she's, I'd say, pretty emphatic about her belief that this is kind of the solution to lots of problems.
Well, to me, it makes me question whether this is going to be it. More likely it won't. In the future, we're going to find more studies that will kind of send us a different direction. She even says that in the 1990s, when it comes to families and the interaction between teachers and students, the way that you will praise their self-esteem, years later, they find out that that wasn't really the right way to approach someone to be successful and to have the right mindset. So I wonder whether, yes, it is nice to be able to read and to knowledge how important it is to focus your mindset, to get things done and to improve yourself. And but it makes me wonder what else, how everything changes over time.
Yeah.
A lot of people, and I always bring my perspective as a stay-at-home mom raising 3 kids. I know we all are parents, and but it makes me question, like, how do I show to my kids the love to get things done and to work hard or something, because they do have everything, like what's the right balance of praising them and showing them hard work, or give them a knowledge and just focus on school and just focus on what you're doing, but you don't have to do anything around the house. So I wonder, like, those dynamics and how they will play out, because at the end, the goal that I believe we all have is that we want happy families, happy individuals. They are happy with themselves, right? Of whatever they have accomplished. So it's a lot of questions in my mind, Paul.
Yeah.
Good book.
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was interesting how they talk about the science of the brain, and we've seen so many books of late tell us more and more about what we're learning about the brain. And I was thinking about the speaker who came to talk to the groups of parents, the teenage brain it was, and they talked about the evolution of the teenager's brain and how the different synapses they connect and how addiction fits in with that. And this is something that that Carole spoke about in her book about how you can start to train and develop your brain. I wonder what we're going to know about the science and the evolution of the brain, the different sections of it. So it may just be, you can speed up your brain and you can rewire your brain. But I wonder if in 15 years, we actually find out that there's a specific aspect that helps encourage that, that we don't know much about. Because there's still so much we don't know about the brain. I think it's fascinating to learn.
Yeah, it certainly seems no question that the 90s books where they talk about kind of giving kids self-esteem by praising what they do. I mean, I don't know, I can't remember what her expression was, but it kind of felt like she was consigning like a whole generation of kids, like kind of, well, they failed or we failed them, and let's do better with this new generation.
Yeah.
But I do think that we'll learn more from kind of the evolution of neuroscience about kind of how this works and perhaps how to be more precise. I'm sorry, Kim, I talked over you.
No, please finish your thought.
I did. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, I wanted to build on what you mentioned about kind of a lost generation where the product and the outcome of their work was praised versus the process being praised. I was probably part of that generation, or maybe it was just the school I went to, but I keep that in mind when I evaluate students. You know, I teach adults, so when they can span generations. So realizing that they may not have had the benefit of this this philosophy and these findings being incorporated into, you know, their development as students, I approach them with that. Just because you got a C in this assignment doesn't mean you won't get the content.
Yeah.
Just you haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah.
So sometimes even adults need the reaffirming. Adult students need the reaffirming in that. Yeah. Oh, and then the other part you mentioned about what are some gaps or maybe some questions we had. One of the things that occurs to me, especially since she talks about the implementation of supporting a growth mindset in a classroom, is thinking about that scalability and implementation across schools and across teachers, because teachers within even one school, never mind one school system, could approach this differently. So if a teacher was trained in the 70s, that teacher may have a very different perspective than a teacher who is trained in, you know, the 2020s.
Absolutely. Actually, maybe we can pivot a little bit to think about where we might have seen kind of fixed and growth mindsets in maybe in school, maybe in work, and you know, maybe good examples, bad examples. And we're going to go to Mike in his desert island to see.
Yeah, I think some of it circles back to even like our first book. And when we talked about, with 7 Habits and, taking ownership of things, right? I mean, someone who has a growth mindset takes ownership of their mistakes, takes ownership of their rules and responsibilities. And you see that all the time in workplaces, with our children, where people do not want to take ownership of a situation they might have been in. It's somebody else's fault. Well, the reason why I didn't pass that test is because the teacher did X, or the reason why I didn't finish this assignment or I bombed that presentation is because of Y. So someone with a fixed mindset, tends not to take ownership of those obstacles, or for lack of a better term, of failures, right? Or those learning experiences. They fail to grasp the potential learning experience that's in front of them and try and get better from it. It becomes a brick wall in front of their ability to have progress. So.
I was reminded actually of something she said. It was an Einstein quote she used somewhere, where he said, I was never the smartest person. I just stuck to things longer." Which, of course, we always talk about people being an Einstein, right? As if, but it sort of redefines how you might consider somebody who is brilliant.
Yeah.
So thoughts about where you've seen fixed mindset, school, work. Rosanna, go to you.
Where I seen fixed mindsets.
Yeah, or a growth mindset, and I'm thinking.
Well, I think professionally, many of us are always comparing ourselves to others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you always see in a coworker bringing a project and being so neat on the presentation, and it gives you an impression that wow, this person got it, but you don't know how long that person worked on that project too. Yeah. It also reminds me of what you just said, which is it's all the work that we do inside of ourselves, like self-esteem also works in here. And it's also connected. It's fascinating, to be honest, because you can, in the times that we're living right now, I like what Rachel mentioned. I have so many questions of what can we do today to make the world a better place? How can we teach a good mindset to the kids in low income housing, and that they have different school settings? It's a nutrition, it's at the household, it's at the parents raising, or it's just so many questions of what really brings the great outcome of having somebody being a caring person and also reaching their full potential. Because at the end of the day, this is what we're here for, right? We are all trying to do our best in whatever sector or in career or path you have. Even as a parent, to bring the next generation on. I feel like it's such a huge responsibility and a huge, bag in your bag. It's like, what can I do I don't want to fail my kids. I don't want to fail the future. This is my legacy. So what can I do to send that right mindset? It's just, I have more questions than anything.
So I guess one thing is defining how you apply growth mindsets to that problem. And I guess one of the ways would be, I think, to think about it as a way of learning. You talk about learning from others, like others who kind of do things really well. But what are they doing that I could apply to that scenario? Yeah.
But what is mindset? The mindset is the set of abilities, right? Owned by someone. Yeah. It's so much of the. I guess it's not just wanting to go get something. It's a lot of the mindset. It has an emotional component that varies, think about abusing households, that person is connecting her wires in a different mindset than the one person with loving parents might have. So is that one thing that sets people for failure or for success? So I have way more questions. Like Kim last week, they have more questions, but I have more questions.
Yeah. And I think that's a bit of the challenge actually about, so I recall, I don't even remember this, on the wall in 5th grade, there was a sign which said, have a growth mindset. And I think part of the problem in retrospect I'm having with that now is, it's like, 5th graders, really? Like a sign on the wall that says have a growth mindset? How much is that going to help? What are the kind of interventions you really need to do to make that meaningful and bring it to life? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the questions that you ask. Whether you're a teacher or a mentor. And, when to answer, Rosanna, your thought process is those communities, people they need good mentors. They need good role models and people to encourage, to teach, to handhold, to do those things. I think she talks about in the book some of the questions that she even, we would ask our kids, right? Instead of asking how your day was, what did you learn?
Yeah.
Just that simple question. I try and ask my kids, and they roll their eyes at me now a little bit, but I'm like, well, what are you grateful for today? What did you learn? What are you grateful for? What was hard?
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I don't want to take over the whole conversation, but it is fascinating because she did mention that we need and we must try to develop our capacities, our talents and our abilities. And you can do it through hard work, through strategies, and through good mentoring for others. But then it raised another question. Are we in an environment where we are open to mentor other people? Or our ego will always get in the way, whether, I had it rough and I went to college and I did, I don't know, so many hours of study, and I'm not going to make it easy for so-and-so who's coming on the way. There is so many questions along the path of having the right mindset. And sometimes it's a matter of luck to find someone that will embrace you and take you over so you can keep developing despite the challenge. I don't know if I'm...
Yeah, no. So I think you're looking for people if you're looking for mentors, looking for people who you can identify as having growth mindsets, feels like a kind of a criteria.
Yeah. I would almost make the argument that for that person who's successful, who had it rough, who doesn't necessarily want to give back because they want someone else to also have it rough, probably is a fixed mindset person and probably would not be a great mentor.
That's probably a better way of framing it. Thank you. So conscious of time. So a different question for you, Rachel. As a result of just reflecting again on growth mindsets, is there anything you're thinking about kind of changing or doing differently as a consequence of our conversation?
Well, I think one of the things I'm going to do differently is reflect on my life and the crossroads that I've come in. And did it happen because of my mindset, or what were the factors? So I think it gives me the opportunity to take inventory, because I can definitely identify myself in so many things about the books. Especially, I couldn't read very well when I was young. I was always nervous about, wasn't quite stuttering, but stumbling over words. And they force us to read out loud in social studies. I'm still traumatized and I'm 50. So, clearly I have to get over it. But I think I always look for the opportunity to reflect and take inventory. And I think what I'm going to do is explore what about my mindset was I thinking, or where was I at the time? I also want to think about how I can approach the kids differently. I definitely think that it's something that if on autopilot, I will be more instruction driven rather than asking questions. I am so reminded after you read this book, Paul, you used to have a piece of paper and you would have it up for the kids. And I still have a photograph on my phone, and it's you holding up a piece of paper and it says, "What wonderful things happened to you this week?" And Henry, who was 8 at the time, so 8 and 10, had taken in pencil and written with an 8th grader's little fingers, "Stop it," with an exclamation mark. So I so enjoy that, but I think as a 13-year-old, he may have a different response.
I think there might be some eye rolling, but yeah.
I can share that photograph with everyone later if you'd like to see it.
Funny.
So Kim, reflections on kind of maybe having kind of gone back to the book now about like looking forward, where might you think about applying it?
Yeah, well, piggybacking on what Rachel said, I think, the way I talk about it to the girls has to change developmentally. So, and meeting them, so trying to use the examples in their life to bring these ideas of growth mindset to life. So it may not necessarily be in academics, so that's an easy go-to with it. But how else can I frame this idea of growth through the process? And even if the outcome isn't the value in the process, not just the outcome, because I think that's going to be a long haul as a parent.
Yeah.
And realizing that what I teach may not necessarily be what they hear from various teachers.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. One of the things that she actually touches on, and again, I'm not sure if I've seen this somewhere else or it's in the book, but she talks about how important it is to train your inner voice, to enable you to be kind of growth mindset oriented. I think it's easy for the inner voice to be an inner critic and kind of put you in a position where you don't want to try new things because there is a fear of getting them wrong. So, I'm going to close this week with my sort of standard question, which is for people listening who haven't read the book, what's the one thing you want them to know? I'm going to start with Kim this time.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, for people who are listening who may not have read the book, what's the one thing you'd want them to know?
It can be life-changing. It really helped as an adult. It helped me move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. Even though I felt like at that point in my 30s, I should have known that by now. You know what I mean? It helped me grow. And so I like that the book is rooted in evidence, but then there's also experiential evidence that it was helpful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
That was awesome. Life-changing. Can't get much better than that, right? So, Rachel.
I would say celebrate the mistakes because everyone grow and learn. That for me, if there's nothing, that's my takeaway.
Yeah. Nice. Rosanna?
I mean, these two answers are pretty amazing. Celebrate the mistakes, and I mean, I love that.
I apologize. I'm going in this order because last time when Beth was on, she's like, "Oh, let Mike go first," or so it's like, and then he was like, "No, don't let Mike go first." So,
He does give the best answer, so
yeah. No pressure.
No, I mean, I think the book is a must-read book. It's interesting. I think the more you read books, the work with your inner self, the stronger your mindset will be, the more positive it is. So you're being mindful of the change that must happen and that needs to happen, and that's the only way to make change happen. It sounds like a riddle, but it's not.
That's good. So, Mike, what words of wisdom do you have to finish us out today?
It's a practical book about science without the woo-woo.
The woo.
Yeah.
I mean, so if you want something that's going to get down and dirty, give you examples, give you a practical guide to go from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset without a whole lot of fluff and nonsense in between, this is the book for you. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'd forgotten about it actually when I kind of went back to it this last week is how sort of dense it is in terms of content. Like my opinion of grit is not quite so high as yours, and I kind of felt that there's a lot of repetition in grit, whereas this felt like it was worthy of kind of making the same point in all these different ways. And I'll finish with the Billy Bean story, which I thought was just great. If you don't know Billy Bean, he was the movie Moneyball was about Billy Bean, who I can't remember who played him, so I'm sure someone knows that.
Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt. There we go. The real life Billy Bean was apparently a fantastic baseball player who didn't thrive very much as a player because he didn't deal well with not hitting every ball out of the park. And it points to some other players, like Lenny Dykstra, if you kind of remember him, who had far less talent but was far more successful because he was able to kind of make the most of his talent and apply himself. Well, when Bean kind of got beyond the point of failing in his playing career, he kind of took stock and started to figure out that players who were successful were often successful not because of pure talent, but because of their mindset. And essentially the story of him building the Oakland A's with the second lowest payroll in baseball and taking them to the playoffs was of him finding players who had the mindset to be of higher value than the pure numbers kind of coming through, the AAA would have you believe. So in a nutshell, I think the Billy Bean story probably tells you a lot about kind of some of the stories in the book and kind of how just having a completely different frame, having a completely different mindset about what success looks like can make such a difference. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. There ends our third episode. I'm not quite sure what we're going to look at next week, but hopefully it'll be as worthwhile. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paul, everyone.